We're going to get going pretty quickly here. And, Judy, where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
We're going to have program first. Great.
Would you like to do your introductions?
So, the people that were supposed to come tonight were Joan and Larry Bensley. Sadly, Larry is quite ill this week. No way that Joey wants to leave him. But about 2 weeks ago, before Larry was ill, they had run into these friends, Jim and Kathy Miller, who are going to talk to us tonight. And Jim and Kathy asked if they could come to the program. And so Joe emailed me and asked, and of course we said, yes, come. So they were planning to come anyway. They have worked on this house in Omena since the minute they retired, as I understand it. So we're going to have Jim and Kathy Miller speaking to us this evening. They've been very active in the restoration, and the house they have been working on was moved too. If you have the Omena book, A Place in, no, is it A Place in Time? Yeah, yeah. There are references to it. There have also been a lot of references to it in the Leland Enterprise historical articles, which I try to read a lot. So, anyway. Kathy is a retired 6th grade teacher. She will do a great job speaking. And I don't know what, Jim is a transplanted Californian, but we're glad to have him here. What did you do before you retired?
I worked for a division of Caterpillar.
Okay, the division of Caterpillar. It's yours. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Judy. First of all, besides being very glad to be here, I want to thank Judy and Ken for having us to the home. We had a really wonderful farmhouse dinner this evening and met some of their friends and some of you that are here today. I kind of had a deja vu when I walked into your building. I was in this building in 1971 for a wedding. It was my high school friend who now we were college age, and she got married. She was from Saginaw, and I came up here and went to the wedding, and that's the last time I was in here. So it was a little different. It was a Catholic church, right?
No.
At one time? Am I all goofed up?
It's always been a township.
Okay, well then, okay.
There was a Catholic across the street.
St. Joe's is another.
Right across the street. You're pretty close.
Well, anyway, my memory fails me on some things. As Judy said, Kathy Miller is my name, my husband Jim. We moved to Omena in 2005 from California. I have Michigan roots. Jim is a native. We would come back every summer because I have family in Traverse City. And we would stay with them for a year or two, but then after that we started renting cottages all over, Old Mission included, just all over, getting a feel for the area, because as we got older we started talking retirement and would we really, really want to move back here. And it became a definite yes, and I'm very, very fortunate that this native Californian came back here. So we get back to Omena. We don't know anyone in Omena, but Jim came back in the process of our home being built, I think 5 or 6 times, to work with the contractor and the builders and all that. And he drove every time, and because he brought stuff. And he actually went on the internet at some point because he didn't know any of the history of where our house was being built. It was an empty lot, but there was an old building at the back of it, a rundown cement block building, ugly, roof caved in, and he just didn't know what that was. So he went on the internet and he found, I think it was a website or
I looked for the Omena Historical Society.
yeah, and Joey Bensley's name popped up. So Jim likes to tell the story that he and Joey met on the internet. And so he milks that. But Joey and Larry were extremely welcoming to us when we came. We did find out there is quite a bit of history with our piece of property. Had no clue, but we learned quite a few things. It was actually part of the property that was the second Omena Inn. The original Omena Inn was out on Omena Point. And after that burned down, this one was built, and it was a thriving resort through the 40s, mid-40s. After the war, things changed with the resorts. We had 9 resorts in Omena at one time. Hard to believe. We had 3, if you've been to Omena, you know what I'm talking about. We had 3 gas stations in Omena at one time. It's just crazy to hear that history. And all that beach glass we're now finding on our beaches, that's because the resorts and the farmers threw their refuse out in the bay. And all of that glass is being eroded and washed and smoothed. And so when we find a piece of green or blue or lavender glass, we're thrilled, but it was somebody's trash, you know. Joey and Larry are in a hard situation right now. Judy mentioned they're having major health issues, and we're very close friends with them, so we're debating whether to go to the hospital following this presentation and see them. We're going to get in touch with their daughter after this, but I know they wanted to come. Joey felt so bad about not being able to make it, but I know you understand. So it wasn't until yesterday that we found out that they were coming here tonight. So you're getting the second string. Joey and Larry are just a fount of knowledge. We're the newbies. We learn as we go. One of the first things we did in Omena was attend a privy dig. And that's where we started thinking how these people are crazy nuts about their history. But that was really fun. So we're here to talk about our museum. The beginnings of it was an old farmhouse that was built in 1876. It was just a basic farmhouse. And it was built on land that at one time had been owned by George Custer. Some of you might know that there's a strong presence of Custer in this area, over there anyway, due to the fact that he married into a family, Elizabeth Bacon, whose family was from Monroe, I believe, and they had property up here. So through his marriage, he became a property owner, and like I said, there's a strong presence. We have friends who inherited a small, modest home in Omena several years ago. And at one point, he brought this old box over to Jim because he knew Jim really liked history. And he said, there might be some stuff in here that might interest you. Jim went through it. There was a deed to that property signed by George Custer. So that is in our museum now. And is the original in the museum
No,
or
they
a
kept the
copy?
original.
Okay, our friend kept the original, but the copy of the deed. So those kinds of things are prevalent in the area. We're always learning things. Custer's wife was named Elizabeth Bacon Monroe, and that house eventually was sold to Rinaldo Putnam. Putnam is a big name over in Omena. You see Putnam Road, Putnam this, Putnam that, and so our next door neighbor is a Putnam. So that's one of the names over there that you will see quite a bit. There's still many Putnams in that area. In the late 1800s, Rinaldo sold it to the Cloud family, which also has a presence in Omena to this day. And at that time, those owners, the Clouds, expanded and improved the farmhouse to the point where some people even refer to it as a mansion. I'm not sure what that meant, but they added a second story. They made it much bigger, a bigger kitchen. They put a wraparound porch on it. At that time, it was called the Tower House because they actually put a tower up on the roof. And one of these
That's the picture right there, there's a tower.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
That's the only known picture of it.
Yes. So today, our museum is actually called, help me out, the Putnam Cloud Tower House. Okay, that is its official name when you don't want to just call it the museum. Then, in 1936, the Clouds gifted that house to the Jesuits, who own a big piece of property over in Omena. Some of you might have gone by it. It's called the Villa Marquette. It's very much up and running. You don't see people there all the time, but they do use it as a retreat, and they sometimes have open houses and different functions there. It's a nice piece of property, but that house became very much in disrepair. At one time, the Jesuits used it as a chapel. It had a big room in the back. They took out walls in the ceiling, and the back room was their chapel. But by 2004, it was in such dreadful shape that the Jesuits were going to tear it down. And that's when the movement, Omena Historical Society, went into action. When they heard that that was going to happen, they just knew it was on property that, first of all, had been owned by Custer, and it had been since 1876, on and on and on. So this movement approached the Jesuits about getting this house, and they ended up agreeing to sell it to OHS, Omena Historical Society, for $1. $1. Now, they also agreed, very generously, to pay $10,000 to move it, which is what it would have cost them anyway if they were going to get rid of it. So they just agreed to go ahead and pay that. So this happened the year before we moved, so we did not witness this, but it went on the back of a flatbed truck from the Villa Marquette, about a quarter of a mile down the road, down 22, to its present site. And I guess the village made a big deal about it. I mean, there's pictures of parades, and they made just a huge thing. And from there, they went into major work, and this is where Jim especially got involved with the volunteers. The additions, I'm sorry, not the additions, they took the building back to its original farmhouse form. So they took away that wraparound. The tower had since fallen off. The additions, porches and things like that were taken off. So you'll see some pictures of a very plain looking house. And now that it's been restored, it's a nice looking plain house. And Jim will go into all the details of those renovations. But the house was moved in 2004. It took the place of a pole barn right in the middle of Omena, which, very happily was a lot better than a pole barn. It fits right in the curve of our village with the Tamarack Gallery, our old general store, our post office. All of those are old buildings, and it just makes such a nice little curve there. People take great pride in those old buildings. Our historical society does they did major fundraisers. They'll continue to do major fundraisers. I think the first big one that they did was the mayoral election, which was a K-9, and maybe you read about that. We don't have a city government in Omena. So you wouldn't believe how much money that thing, we've done it 3 times, and the last one was the most successful. But I think we should do it every 4 years, but for some reason, money, we do it every 3 years. And the last one, and it cost nothing to put this together. We made $6,000, just like that. So I won't go into the details of how it worked, but it's just amazing what people will do for their pets. So Christmas and spring, our OHS group gets together for a major spring cleanup, all volunteers. Christmas, they decorate the whole village, and including the museum, so it looks really pretty in the holidays. And I'm not going to go into any more detail about the restoration because that's where Jim can tell you a lot more. But Joey asked me to read you a poem. And this was written by one of the Putnam family members. It was written in 2005, at the time that the house was being renovated and it had moved to its new place. It's called Putnam Cloud Tower House. This old house is more than just a building of simple wood and nail. It's the reason that we gather here, from whence our ancestors hail. In awe, down historic halls we walk, full of their pioneer spirit. Be still and listen to the whispers of the past. Can you hear it? This house, a shelter for many, it has a life its own. Who was born here, who has died here, and how many generations grown. I believe that life's a journey, and no matter where we roam, we often end right where we start. It's worth the travel home. This old house is a landmark now, a structure built to last. Sometimes our future is never clearer than when we are looking to the past. So that was somebody by the name of Lori Putnam. She wrote it in 2005. So that's my part of this introduction. And one thing I'm going to just share, if you have a second on that now, but after we're finished, Our OHS volunteer group is amazing, it really is. And I'm sure Jim is going to address that. When we came on board, they had a newsletter that went out once a year.
Yes, it was.
A newsletter.
I think twice a year, but it was a bulletin more than.
Yeah, it was like a flyer, just what's happened, what's going on, what's the plan. Now that newsletter has gone into a series of color newsletters, and then it went into a magazine. So we now have an annual magazine that comes out. How does we even do this? A little tiny town. And this last year they did a special edition because it was the 10-year anniversary of our museum. So it's just quite a nice thing that the village has. And so with that, I thank you very much for having us today, and all you've been very welcoming, and I feel like I didn't do Joey and Larry justice, but you got me, and I enjoyed it very much.
So, you're probably all wondering, how does a guy go from living on the coast of Southern California to a privy dick? I mean, just think about it. One day I'm sitting there, they said, but I thought a privy was something that you had information about. You're privy to this and that. I didn't know it had to do with a three-holer outhouse. How do you use 3 holes in an outhouse? I guess that was another question that I had. Thank you for having us here. It's special to be here. And I don't want to make any false pretenses here. We are here replacing Joey and Larry. And Larry's a very good friend of mine. He's been very helpful, helping us adapt to living in Michigan, and he's just a great guy. And I just pray that he's okay. So I also want to say that, as you know, you guys are all volunteers and so on and so forth. No organization is ever successful without a good group of volunteers. And ideally, you have volunteers of all ages, because you need some people that are a little bit more able to do the heavy lifting. And that was one of our biggest challenges, is finding younger people. But it's amazing what us old farts can do, too. But I wanted to say, as far as Joey and Larry goes, they led by example. They were the 2 primary people in the, I won't say the moving of it, but the 2 primary people in the restoration and the coordination of all the projects. They headed all the committees. Once in a while there'd be a little offshoot committee, but they headed the committees. They recruited volunteers. They went out for bids to contractors. And these are all things, I know you're looking at a similar path that you're going to go down. So you need to keep people in mind that might be good, that would be willing to do it. So our museum would have never succeeded had Joey and Larry not been there heading up the operation. I'm still involved in because once the building was all done, we kind of took a big sigh of relief, because that's all we had been doing. I mean, night and day, with lights at night.
For 2 years.
For 2 years. We would be inside that building just anywhere. Larry did all the cabinet work himself. And there's a little galley area. He made all of he put the sink in, he put the woodwork around the back of it. It was just amazing what he would do, and he loved doing it. I mean, it wasn't like it was a laborious thing for him. He just loved it. Working in his barn, which, by the way, is the oldest barn in Leelanau County. It was built in 1866, and it looks today exactly as it did then. The Bensleys do not alter history. When they moved into the house, they moved into the Craker house, and that Crakers go way back. I mean, they're way back in Omena history. So the first thing Joy did when she moved in was to take the kitchen. I'm digressing here a bit. She took the kitchen of that house and completely stripped it down to the original configuration. And it's really kind of nice. I mean, there's nail holes in the wall and stuff like that. But she just got it down to the hardwood floor. They have a wood stove in there. It's really something. So when we put an exhibit together, a lot of times we just go to the Bensley house and take everything out of their house. And take it down to the museum. So the next time we have an exhibit that comes up, they go, do you think we could get those things back that we need in our, yeah, okay. But you're gonna be missing that bedroom stuff, you know? So, anyway, without the Bensleys, it would have never succeeded, at least not as been as successful as it has been. So, Joey and Larry had provided what they were going to talk about. So I'm going to fumble through this because it's